What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you with that weekly play-by-play for MHA. Today we'll be discussing Class 1A taking on Deku today. So, this chapter is one that I think we all kind of saw coming, and depending on your perspective, I know some people were likely very disappointed. There were a lot of people who were like, yes, Deku, stomp everybody out. We're going to crush all of our opponents. Everybody's going to lose, all that other good stuff. That's not the direction Horikoshi went, and I'm grateful for this because at the end of the day, where Deku is in the story right now, if that would have been his solution, if that would have been a contradiction to everything he's trying to avoid, he would have been taking massive risks. So it's good to see that nobody's really doing anything extreme yet, because that would kind of contradict the whole point. And so one of the things that I just want to point out, though, is that one of the opening shots in this one was Ida specifically. The intensity in his stare is very reminiscent of the Host of City days, and we get to also see that Bakugo's gladly challenging him on, and we get a reference to some of the earliest chapters of My Hero Academia, in that Bakugo states that Deku is being drawn differently, which is a callback to during the early arcs of MHA, where I believe it was Deku himself who made that same statement about All Might, who was being drawn differently. So, obviously Deku isn't trying to actually fight them. If the whole point of this is to protect them and keep them safe, it doesn't actually make sense for him to be trying to beat the crap out of them to get away, because that would just open them up to vulnerabilities and being attacked by other villains. So that's something that I think it's worth noting. Now, with the opening move being Smokescreen, we see that Bakugo is more than capable of blowing it away. They already understand how it works due to having already had the research and being able to follow the rumors. Deku is quick to immediately try to flee, and it's important to note that this chapter was moreover designed to emphasize that Deku does have an impact on the class larger, even without having as a direct personal relationship with all of these people. It's important to note that a lot of these people's reasoning, they themselves are aware, isn't that necessarily big of a deal, but it's more about the idea that at the end of the day, we've been through so many things together. Because while Deku sees this as a journey of him with One for All, the rest of the people kind of can see this as, well, sure, Deku, you got One for All, but at the end of the day, when the USJ was attacked, we were there too. At the end of the day, when the training camp was attacked, we were there too. When Shigaraki pulled up on you at the mall, we weren't right there, but that's because that was a one-on-one interaction, and Uraraka was able to show up because we were there too. Every step of the way of this journey that you've been taking, we've been there by your side. So what sense does it make for you to abandon us now? Is kind of more over the theme here. It's important to note, because if you even thinking about the war arc, there was Shoto, Bakugo, Deku, Uraraka, Ida, Sue, all next to each other, all together. Even Manga Fukadashi was there, but we have all these pairings, all these teams that have been like set up from the beginning, and now that's the deciding event. If you notice, these are the people who are around towards the end of the chapter, or who are leading the charge at the beginning of last chapter. So what you see here is the completion of that six, that image from way back in the day, trying to get that six back together. And so when Code is talking about the principal, yes, it's kind of a weak reason, because he's not close to Deku. He's not actually an important character in the series, and this is kind of Horikoshi acknowledging that by showcasing how some of these people don't have strong reasoning for why they're doing what they're doing, but they're kind of just along for the ride. But it's because even if they aren't directly close friends with Midoriya, they do have some relation to him. They still took the provisional license exam together. They still went through and trauma bonded with him through all these events. They've been roommates and classmates for a year now. They literally live in the same building. So Koda's reasoning being kind of weak, but ultimately being a reflection of him still trying, is just what makes sense. Sero and him training on Black Whip, Sero being one of his his passing buddy during the provisional license first round. Sero's been around for a while. We know that he's been helping him do lots of training off screen during the 3-month time skip. It makes sense that Sero would have a reason that, he assures him, hey, look, your Black Whip's kind of scary. He's kind of joking around with him about the similarities, but they both got similar quirks. And he wants him to kind of think about the way he's intimidating people when it's just supposed to be like a rope that he's using that's helping him. Jiro tries to stop him making a wall of solid air, it looks like, which I'm a real big fan of, especially because I was a big fan of Air Gear when that was running. So if you enjoyed Air Gear, then you could kind of remember when the Rumble King would make air walls and then people would have to like fight and try to break through solid air. But she's kind of doing this kind of stuff with by using sounds, which I'm really for, because it's like the Jade Road, Jim King stuff. Now, Jiro's one of those characters that, because she's a lot more honest and a bit more awkward about her feelings in the process too, sometimes she acknowledges that, you know what, yeah, it might not be that big of a deal that I did this here notes with you and we had this exchange, but it's worth noting that it impacted me still. And the Culture Festival being an arc that was about the ways we can help each other beyond just fighting and punching the bad guys really means we're taking that central theme from Culture Festival and once again bringing it back to the surface here with Jiro's interaction here, talking about how there's more to being a hero than just fighting. You also have to save hearts, and in turn, Deku, you need to realize that your influence and your sphere as a hero goes beyond just you punching bad guys. It seems as if he's forgotten that these days. We got Ojiro talking about Sports Festival, and obviously a lot of people don't really care about that. It's technically a really small moment, but Deku was hyper defensive of Ojiro for a guy who had only known him for less than a month. But that's kind of reflective of that post-USJ bond that was starting, where everybody had just went through some crazy intense stuff together, and now they really had a support for each other that would, continue throughout the rest of the series, or they would start building up and building upon it further and further. Deku being able to break out of his tail is not really a surprise. Tokoyami being able to grab him and, kind of put some screws to him. No one's surprised that it's been keeping up with how successful Tokoyami's been. We get the Sugar Man dialogue. This is probably my least favorite line of interaction during this whole course, because he basically says that he won't give Deku the ability to make candy apples for Eri anymore. And that's just a very strange low blow, and that's one that I think you would use specifically to antagonize and fight, not to bring him back. But I think it's once again designed to highlight that these characters that we're getting to run through right now are the ones who are not close to Midoriya. These are the ones who care about Midoriya and are close to his friends and therefore want to be a part of this mission and have gone through these same events with him throughout the story together. And so keep in mind also, these are the same people who, if you think about it, joint training arc, again, having worked together as a team. We haven't seen Mina yet. That's important. Or we haven't seen them try, so that's probably going to pop up next chapter. So I guess depending on how that goes down. Momo once again committing the war crimes. She tries to put Deku in it seems like a sleeping gas chamber. The important thing here is that she was able to pop out this complex machine in the time it took Deku to realize what was going on, because he was thrown into the building and then there's actually visible clear space around him, and suddenly the straps and things pop out. And you can tell that she had just finished making it as she's walking around from behind it. So that's really good movement and coordination on the part of Class 1A. And Kaminari trying to actually get the shock in to maybe get him to chill out. The insulated sleeves, the Ragnarok womb, all these attempts to seal Midoriya, and people just trying to get him to talk and listen. And it's funny because everybody's been saying, oh, Class 1A didn't try to talk to him enough. Bakugo was too antagonistic. And now you see here that they're still trying to force the conversation to happen at least. But they also are fully prepared to use force to restrain him so they can talk to him, because they are going to have to, or he will simply be gone. Man, it's amazing to think about all those frustrations that people were expressing on a timeline that could have just been resolved by accepting the fact that the kid is very stubborn and he's going to wild out. One of the most fun parts of the chapter for me was finding out that the children were genuinely not tripping off danger sense. Deku himself states that, I get it, I know you're all worried about me. You're worried deep down in your hearts. I know that for a fact. There's no real danger or malice here, because danger sense would have alerted me otherwise. And I talked about how with Bakugo being somebody who wants to access his highest level of explosive power, he tends to focus on saving, and how for Deku versus Kachan 2, for Deku versus Kachan 3, it'd be interesting if during their fight, Bakugo wasn't setting off danger sense. And then we get confirmation that none of them have been triggering it this whole time, because they actually do care about him, which does show some of the intent factors that go into whether or not danger sense should be triggered. For example, Midoriya's danger sense didn't trigger for the Legant shooting at his gun or at his phone, and we saw that danger sense was triggering for her firing at him. It was barely giving him time to react. So it's because she was targeting his phone that danger sense did not react. Danger sense partially focuses on the intent, whether it's basically a psionic field around him that siphons through people's emotions and malice. I don't know. But it's important to note, and many people have emphasized this, there's a slight breakage towards the end of page 17 where he's like, I'm begging you to, I'm fine. But it kind of looks like a lightning bolt in the framework. And usually when the lightning bolts are tossed up, that's an indication that danger sense is being used. And then he crashes into Todoroki's ice wall. And it's important to note that because of the way that Todoroki approaches this, and he's like, hey, you can't even cry anymore. You should probably share this burden with the rest of us. But he also looks kind of irritated, and he used one of his biggest moves. I think there was a small bit of irritation with Deku and a bit of his frustration just also from being benched and while Deku was running free. That played into that. That might have been what triggered it, but it could also just be danger sense getting better and better and Deku's skill progressing so that he can finally use it the same way it was used against Banjo in the Vestige world, where Banjo was firing off little black whip senses or tendrils, and Shinomori was able to sidestep it using danger sense. So more than likely he's going to have to train it to be able to recognize just any form of attack, not just attacks from enemies or those with heavy and malicious intent. Because after all, if somebody drops something and it happens to be an explosive, you still want to be able to detect that. You might not, because there's no intent behind that. And we finally get the payoff of Sue's most hated moment, which was that everybody in the fandom, or at least a lot of people in the fandom, were really resentful of Sue for the way that she felt about them going to Camino and her being sad about the fact that they warned her, they warned them and they still went. And now we see that was set up for this moment where she's confronting Deku. And as I've mentioned, they've been together. They were together through the USJ. They were together through Hosu City on certain levels. With some of them, they were together. You have them like training during final exams. They had to work with partners. Teamwork has been emphasized all throughout this series. Forest training. They were all together when they got attacked. Part of the big, Camino. He was with some of these people. Provisional license. Again, they started off originally as a team. They only got split up because of Bakugo and Shoto being independent, and then Shindo's extra little attack at the end. And even then, they came together. Class 1A has always succeeded their best when they've been willing to work together and taking down insurmountable challenges that they arguably should not be able to face down, at least in the logic of the average everyday person. And that's the significance to Sue confronting him here and hoping that he would listen and to change his mind and move away from this. So I'm really glad to see that we're at this point where we have all these characters that have had their stories and gone through these journeys with Deku saying, even if you have the special power, your situation is not that special. We are all worried about the struggles that are coming with this impending danger of Shigaraki. All for One was never just All Might's problem. All for One and all his villains wasn't just something for the Hero Safety Commission and All Might to handle quick and dirty. If the public had been aware, then people would always, in their minds, realize that these villains are around. They are a real threat. There's substantial danger out here, and maybe that would have helped them understand the dangers that heroes are facing and the kind of dangers that are lurking in the backgrounds. I do think that would have led to a more increased meta-liberation ideology approach, but I also think that the hiding of these informations and these darknesses of the world has made it where so many people are put into a state of shock. When you have the era of All Might lasting 40 years, you have to realize that means that around 30 to 35 years of this, people were fairly peaceful. That's more than a generation. That's arguably 2, but most people would say about 1.5 generations worth of people getting to grow up and largely live in a world that is functionally peaceful. And many of the people who would still be alive would have been around 25, 30, maybe 40 at the most when All Might appeared, and they'd be old, which means some of their memories will have faded, and even more importantly than that, they would have at least spent the last 30 to 40 years in peace, prospering, enjoying themselves. They might not have wanted to pass on those stories. So there's a lot to think about in the realm of the way that this was approached and how it could have been different if everybody understood that All for One and that there was bad and danger in their surrounding areas. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this chapter. I'm excited. I'm trying a new format. Just trying to do the recording and seeing how you guys, so let me know how you feel about that. Then on video, Aniki. But that's all I really got to say about this week's chapter. Shonen Jump break. Got something planned. I might have accidentally double booked. We'll see how that goes. That all said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you have anything important to say, go ahead and leave that comment. Aniki, and I am out.